and welcome to the CX Innovators podcast produced by Networld Media Group. I'm Judy Mottl, editor of Retail Customer Experience. Our talking point today is music and retail, how it impacts the customer shopping experience, and how retailers can use music to drive shopper behavior and hopefully the bottom line forward. So we're excited and very honored to have Ola Sars as our guest. Ola was a co-founder and COO of Beats Music, a subscription streaming service that was acquired by Apple in 2014 in a $3 billion deal. It eventually transformed into what we all know as Apple Music. So this Stockholm-based serial music entrepreneur and 2024 Billboard International Power Player went on to found and serves as CEO of Soundtrack Technologies. It's a music streaming service for business. It was initially developed in a joint effort with Spotify. So Soundtrack serves over 80,000 businesses across 74 countries, and it has a music catalog of more than 100 million tracks that are available for commercial use. So thank you for being here, Ola.
Thank you, Judy, for having me.
So this is a topic very close to my heart. I mean, I'm a music lover, and I'm somebody who has had music impact my shopping experience, both good and bad. So in your view, how critical is music in the store shopping environment, and how can it impact the customer experience?
Well, you said it yourself, Judy. It's there. It's basically everywhere, and 95% actually of U.S. customer interfacing retail outlets, entrepreneurs and businesses are playing music today. So either we like it or not, it's been there since the 50s, since the 60s. Everyone's playing music, but no one's really paying attention. And I think it's about time that people started really thinking about what's the right music for their brand, and how can that help drive business. So to your question, music is out there. It affects the experience of walking into any type of retail or hospitality, or even when you walk into a law firm. If you hear the music, it affects the experience of that specific venue or that specific person or brand that you're interacting with, right? So it's very important. Our ears connect directly to our brain, and they're very active all the time, and they give signals. And neuroscientific research has proven that there's massive effects around what we're hearing and how we feel. So it's real, it's there, and studies have always shown that the right music in the right place at the right time will drive sales. As an example, if you're trying to sell something, it can help you calm down, it can help you perceive time differently, and so on. So it's super important. It really affects the experience and can drive the behavior of a consumer walking into your venue.
And like I mentioned, when I was early on, there was no music in retail back in the 60s on Long Island, New York. But as my kids grew up, the music played a big part. And I could tell the difference that I was in a store geared towards my child and not towards me. And so, how does music kind of relate to the consumer demographic? Because that's important. If you're serving the 16 to 18-year-old, you're not going to be playing, probably Motown or Frank Sinatra, which are at the top of my playlist. So how do you help a retailer decide, where you're going with the music?
Well, it kind of starts with, first of all, we did some research in the US market last year. And just to put it out there, 84% of the consumers walking into a venue actually notice the music in the store. They register the
Wow.
music. 55% of those consumers claim that they value when a shop plays music that they like and that fits the brand. Stating the obvious, of course, but just like it's pretty significant. And 40% of those consumers also claim that they stay longer if the music is right. So it does. It's not background music. It's actually foreground
Right.
music. it registers, and it's an integral part of the whole kind of experience, and it can drive your behavior. The way that you should go about it as a business, independently, if you're a small mom and pop running a small cafe on Long Island, as an example, or if you're running a global brand over the world, it's more or less the same approach, and it's not super complicated.
Right.
You just start like you always start when running a business. You start with your brand, right? And what type of brand experience you want to deliver, and what you stand for, and what you want the customer to think about you and experience when consuming your product. Okay. And usually businesses think about it in terms of either they can have a brand positioning statement, or they can have brand values. They always have something that describes the aspired experience of their business, right?
Right.
And when starting with that, the challenge is to translate that brand positioning statement, if you may, into a musical profile, right? What does it sound like? Soundtrack your brand, or what does your soundtrack look like, or sound like? Sorry. So that exercise can be done in a very sophisticated way with expensive consultants and music specialists that come in and do this interpretation for you. Or it can be as simple as you sit down on a Friday evening and you take the starting point of your brand and you just do a playlist with 10, 20 songs that represent that brand and the representation of the brand. And you can add those 10, 20 tracks into the soundtrack platform, and we will help you create a brand profile sound based on that input. Okay. So that's just different ways of doing it. Our platform helps translate the aspired brand experience into music and a music profile for your brand. That's where it starts.
So, I'm glad you mentioned this whole idea of the playlist on the retailer level. One of my daughters has been in retail for 15 years and worked for different brands, and they all have a different approach when it comes to music. And, some are very, very kind of stuck in letting the store manager do the playlist, which means if you go to one of their stores, maybe in Georgia, it's going to be a different vibe than the store maybe down in Florida. And that consistency, though, the experience can be crucial. So, what is your take in terms of a retailer kind of coming up with their own playlist, kind of not using any data or background?
I think it's intriguing, right? Interesting that, retailers who are becoming more and more sophisticated, more and more digital, using AI in real-time experiential technology, just kind of leave music to the store manager, right? In some instances. This is changing, though. I mean, that's more kind of I would say, an edge case nowadays. Okay. Music has become a part of the strategic thinking and the tactical thinking of delivering a brand experience. So, but we have all kinds. We have brands that actually do distribute the ability to playlist down to the actual store manager because they think it's the right thing to do. Right. And they take that decision proactively. And we have customers that have a completely centralized approach where everything is curated from central instance, meaning from headquarters, and programmed into detail around the world into all of the different retail outlets. So the platform that we provide offers the full ability. The recommendation, though, is to find a solution somewhere in between, where you create a brand sound that's, the guidelines of what your brand sounds like, and then you distribute maybe the ability to implement that brand sound to the different country managers, as an example, and kind of do the interpretations of the brand into different geographies and so forth, into different parts of where your brand is active. But I mean, I think if we go back to some data and we go and talk to the actual business owners and ask them what they think about music, 91% in the same study when we went to spoke to entrepreneurs affirmed that music can make or break their customer experience. So it's not like the business owners don't understand that it can be terrible or good. They understand it. But 95% music as, equally important as an example, a brand ambassador. So it's important. They think about it and they really want to do, but it's been very hard because there hasn't really been products out there to help them do it and really
Right.
soundtrack their brands. So I think it's changing in front of us. I think the possibilities for entrepreneurs, even small businesses, is changing, where you can create your own kind of sophisticated brand experience through software. And I think the future is hopefully brighter than what your daughter and I did also experience growing up and working extra in retail. And every Christmas, I would go home with a massive headache because I've heard the same tracks 90 times.
Right. It's funny when I think back, to the generation before me, there was music, but it wasn't outside of the home mostly. It was an experience at a concert. It was an experience in your own home. It wasn't something where you were out consuming something and music was kind of layered in. And I think it's wonderful. But, I'm curious, what if you're a retailer that kind of has a very broad consumer base and you have a 20-year-old and then you also have the grandmother coming in.
Yeah.
And as a grandmother now, I can tell you that, when I walk into a store, I don't want something coming at me. I don't want anything jarring me. But as a 20 and 30-year-old, I love finding myself like kind of bopping as I shop or hearing a song that reminded me of something from, 10 years earlier. So, is that the biggest challenge is when you're kind of trying to please more than one demographic?
I think it's generally a valid question for retail, right? It's
Right.
like, how do you segment your store experience based on your core, customer segments, and how does that change over time depending on who's in and out of the store and where it is in the world? So
Right.
it's not just music. The good news about music is that it's very flexible and it's a low marginal cost to change. So
Right.
it's a much more flexible media than, for example, what's on the shelf or what's on the billboards inside. So it does provide more flexibility in real time. So, but back to your initial question, this this isn't a new challenge for brands. When I spoke about this interpretation and translation of a brand platform, that's where you start with kind of the overarching, what does our brand sound like?
Okay.
So that's the first kind of that, and that doesn't appeal to everyone.
Right.
Like, so as an example, just a juice bar that we serve, Joe and the Juice. It's a Danish company. They're all over the US as well. They have a very specific kind of target segment that they go after, which is a young crowd, affluent young crowd, more urban area. And they kind of take the trade-off of not being for everyone and very focused deploy music, which is very modern kind of electronic music, 128 BPM house music. They bang it out there in their juice bars. And like, even for me, I'm like, oh, too much for me today. I just want to go home and listen to Neil Young, and but they do it because they want to attract that
Right.
group and they want to have a high tempo, high velocity at the cashier and so forth. So it's a calculated trade-off. So, but the beauty of music is you could also change this over time. Some of our brands have, if you're running a hotel, for example, during the morning 7 to 12, the tempo is very low, acoustic, very much background music. Then during lunch, the restaurants might have, a seating, the tempo goes up a little bit.
Right.
Then in the afternoon it goes down, but then towards the drinks and the bar opening, it changes, and it changes
Right.
to adopt to the change of customer groups walking in and out of your retail. That's the beauty, that you can kind of follow the rhythm of the business with music,
Right.
and appeal to different segments over different geographies, over different time zones without, you don't have to change anything except the music.
Right. I hadn't even kind of thought into that phase by phase process because, thinking retail, you're just thinking you're shopping. But in many of these other venues and experiences, there's different emotions, there's different levels of activity, there's, a different need for the person who's sitting there having their coffee versus the one who wants to go to happy hour, right? So
Yes, very much so.
with all your feedback with all your clients, are there any do's or don'ts that you can share with everybody listening in who's looking to evaluate their music strategy?
I think there's a couple of very broad ones, which is what we've learned from. We do a lot of research with our customers and some very sophisticated kind of statistical modeling where we run different types of experiments to see how it affects sales in real time and stuff like that. So, as an example, we work with a global QSR chain to prove 9% increase in sales by kind of following the rhythm of the business and increasing the kind of the tempo of the music in certain time zones, which made the business sell more desserts and stuff. So they increased sales after lunch seatings, having people stay in and stuff like that. So you can be very advanced in kind of the approach of
Right.
music towards real time data and trying to drive your business. But going back to some basics, what also research has shown us is it's better to not play music than to play the wrong music. So I think
Wow.
that's kind of the first. We've tested with another chain. We've tested silence versus just top 20 versus their brand sound,
Right.
and actually silence performed better on sales than the top 20. But then obviously when they applied their brand sound and the full kind of
Right.
correct approach, they saw sales exceed both silence and top 20. So playing the wrong music will have people leave. So
Right.
it's better not to play music. So if you're going to do it, fully, thoughtfully, like you would do with anything in your business, right?
Right.
You wouldn't let staff write the menu and decide like this is a centralized process that has everything to do with your business. You should treat music very seriously. So that's that's the first recommendation. And then I would say basic stuff like think about the different like time zones of your business. So do you want to appeal to a different type of customer and a different type of experience in the morning? Do you want to appeal to something different and drive something different during lunch? Maybe you want floor traffic to move faster. You need to move up tempo, and then in the afternoon differently, and in the evening. So kind of time slotting your business is also one of those things that people forget. They think like, let's just play the soundtrack and let it sound the same in the morning
Right.
as in the afternoon. But it's really a different business challenge throughout the working day, depending on your business.
Wow. So we got to wrap up, but I have one last question, Olar. And I'm sure you get asked it a million times, but I'm just a little curious. Like, when did music first come into your life in terms of, obviously you've had a tremendous career. So I was just curious about kind of where the music first crept in.
Well, it began in my life. It began very early. I mean, grew up with music, a family listening to music, um, falling in love with music, which isn't hard, by the way. And then growing up and trying to make a career out of music and kind of making a living in music technology, which is only I'm 20 years into that now, where I
Right.
kind of followed my passion and I came from working with completely different things that like, just made me more and more cynical. And I just took a leap of faith and tried to make a living in music technology. And lo and behold, 5 startups later, I'm still here paying the rent. But music that's a long way of saying music has been a huge component in my life from childhood up to now growing up. And the beauty of the digitization of music that I've been part of is this notion that you have all the music in the world at your fingertips. And now my kids are experiencing the music I grew up with. And that's amazing, right? They're all over the place. They're listening
Right.
to Fleetwood Mac and they're listening to weird trap music that I have no
I
idea how
know.
it works out and stuff. And I'm, it's an amazing thing being able to provide this full treasure of everything to all the people in the world.
Yeah, I think music, like writing, like playing an instrument, it's a passion, and that passion shows through in success. and making a difference. And, I feel the same way when my kids say, oh my God, I just heard a great album and it was Bob Dylan. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay, and then, they're
Yeah,
asking me if I ever saw Jimi Hendrix. And I'm like, I'm not that old. Like, I'm not there yet. But it is miraculous because music, can just draw out so much emotion in a person. And I really appreciate
it's an amazing
you
place.
being here and sharing your insight with us.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
And I'd love to have you back in a year or two and see what else Soundtrack is up to. To our listeners, please subscribe to the Networld Media Group's YouTube channel, and you can catch up on all our great podcasts. And thanks again, Ola.
Thank you.